Hi there, this is going to be a film review and we're going to take a look at some of the toys related to Finding Dory. I picked up this colouring in book down at my local Coles. It actually discloses the whole storyline in it, which I don't quite understand why they do that. But I need to use this book in this review of the film to show you something that is important to see, I feel. I'm also going to show you, first up, the films that my son loves, the films that my daughter loves, and some of the films that sort of lay in between. Right up at the top of my son's favourite films, he must have watched this hundreds of times, and I've had to watch it as well. Quite an amazing animated film. Every time we watch it, something else gets revealed in that film. Who hasn't watched that? All I'll say is please go and watch Up. It's a very, very extraordinary story. Very extraordinary. My son's second favourite is Turbo. It took me a while to key into this. It's sort of like the most ridiculous sort of thing in the world, the fact that a snail becomes this sort of Formula 1 car. But in its silliness, it makes you smile. Turbo, it's not a Disney film, that one. It belongs to someone else, I feel. Wreck-It Ralph. Again, it took me a little while to key into this one. My son loves Wreck-It Ralph. All aspects of it. Okay. A clever story as well. Despicable Me 2. He also loves Despicable Me 1. And I'm not even going to show Minions. I hated Minions, but my son loves it. Despicable Me 1 and 2 are amazing animated films. Once again, they're Universal Pictures that do that one. The other one my son loves, oh my goodness me, well, apart from the Cars films, I think he watches these shorts more. Okay, all I can say is that he loves things like that. Okay, my daughter's favourite movie, she sort of grew up with this film, although it came out just a little bit before she was born, Finding Nemo. Okay, I think she's even wondering why did it take so long to get a sequel out, as in Finding Dory, and I think I asked the same question. An amazing animated film, amazing story, very original feeling. Okay, she loves Coraline. That's one of these things, a little bit scary, but scary is good. You know, I mean, even in Finding Nemo, there were some scary parts, and that was what really made it, you know. Jeopardy, Inside Out, a bit of a newish one, a fresh one. My daughter loved that. She was quite eager to see that one. In a sense, she's sort of the age of a lot of the things that this one talks about. Great film, okay. She grew up with this one, Wall-E. Yeah, I think this is one of the all-time classics as well. My daughter loves anything to do with Bugs Bunny, but she's of the wisdom where she asked me, Daddy, why do I like the old ones and not the new ones? And it comes back to the Chuck Jones factor and Mel Blanc. She likes the original stuff that was done by the original people, but the more modern stuff she's quite critical of. The films that I think lie in between both of my children, I love this one as well. This is one of my favourites, The Iron Giant. Okay, Pete Townsend did a video clip years back with an animated thing related to this. I think he was part of the thing behind making this film. It's a great story. A little bit old-fashioned the way it's animated, but that's fine. Okay. Both my children, this is a TV series from way back. I grew up with this one, Wacky Races. Both my children love this to death. They will watch this over and over and over. And I only really bought this for myself. And I was sort of surprised, but not surprised, that my children love this. It's basically Cannonball Run in an animated thing. And it's a little bit predictable, but when you're young, you don't quite realise that. I mean, the 00 car, Dick Dastardly's car, it really is one of the classic cars. There it is there. Okay. I think it's one of the classic designs of a car, sort of Sputnikish in the back, and it's just crazy. Great thing. I wish Hollywood, wake up Hollywood, get this into film form. I know it can be quite dangerous to do this because sometimes they don't translate the film very well. I think that would. Okay, and to let you know where I am in the film industry, this is the first film I worked on. It was produced or made in Sydney. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers film with Ivan Ooze. And to show you something to prove that I was associated with it, there we go. There's a real tub, it's looking all a bit old now, of Ivan's ooze. Okay? So because I've been in the film industry, I know that getting films together and stories and making them work can be a very, very convoluted and complex affair. I think it's important to show you that, to show you what my daughter likes, my son likes, and what I like as well. And we'll keep this one here because it's going to relate back to what we're going to talk about. but we'll push the rest of these aside. Well, this film review is going to have a few spoilers. If you haven't seen the film, it's probably best if you look away. There was a great little feature on before Finding Dory. It was called Piper. All I can say is that Piper was actually a little bit better than the main feature. Maybe other people will agree with me there. I won't say too much about Piper because it's probably best left as a total surprise. Of course, before Finding Dory, there was Finding Nemo. If you haven't seen Finding Nemo, don't worry. Finding Nemo gets fairly well explained in Finding Dory. Just let me point out one thing about Finding Nemo that I think made it very special in relation to the way Dory works. Let me just separate these guys. The most important separation is to pull Nemo out, because Finding Nemo, well, it was all about Finding Nemo. The real chemistry of Finding Nemo was going on between these two. You had straight Marlin, who was really seriously looking for his son, and you had the ridiculousness and funniness of Dory, which in her stupidity, in a strange way, was actually helping Marlin get to where he needed to go. That was the bulk of the funnies in that film. Little Nemo over here was stuck in a tank in a dentist surgery. I don't want to really give too much away, but there was a lot of fear there. The fear of that little girl, what was the girl's name? Daria? The girl who shakes the fish to death in the bag, and the other great critters who all had little reasons to, use Nemo for all different purposes, was one of the great strengths of the film. Okay, now let's get back and let's talk about how these critters worked in Finding Dory. Okay, Finding Dory, obviously it's all about Dory. We get to learn about Dory's past, we get to see Dory's parents, we get to see the little baby Dory, which is absolutely cute and adorable. My children are desperate to have that toy. Silly me went out looking for it. Do you think I can find a baby Dory anywhere? I think they're missing out there. We should have seen this toy out. Okay, maybe it's coming. Maybe it just hasn't been released where I live. But nevertheless, in Finding Dory, Dory relies on flashbacks and things to sort of build her past up, and she seems desperate to want to find her parents. And somehow, in a silly way, she cons Marlin and Nemo into basically traversing the ocean to get over to where she thinks her parents live, in Dory's silly way. I feel the chemistry between these characters has been broken up for the fact all of a sudden we have someone sort of in between, that is Nemo. Back in the original film, remember, much of the chemistry was between these two characters here. When you add another character, Dory starts to lose her punch. Along the way, of course, you meet up with some old characters, and some of them help them to get across to California, where for some reason Dory wants to go in her silliness. And then Dory gets captured and she gets separated away from Nemo and Marlin. So I feel this was one of the weakest aspects of the film, because the separation away of Dory at this point, and what happens is Dory ends up becoming the tagged Dory, because she ends up in a marine park, and there's a very strange Sigourney Weaver aspect to that. This is one of the ones that swim if you poke in the right spot. Which I still haven't worked out. I don't know whether it's like an inside joke, a Hollywood inside joke, but all of a sudden Dory has something on her fin there that one of the critters in this marine extravaganza area wants, and it's this guy here, this octopus called Hank. Okay, the divide at the marine park is what happens. You get that group of people there, and all of a sudden you've got Marlin and Nemo together. Remember, Marlin needs something silly to work with, which sort of happens, which I'll get to soon. I think Nemo and Marlin never quite hit it off in a sense of being a good two characters together. Meanwhile, we've got Hank, which ends up being like a very serious character who desperately needs something that Dory's got. And once again, Hank just gets done over by the silliness and the frivolity of Dory, because I mean, that's what Dory's all about. Ellen DeGeneres' voicing of Dory is very complex, it's very emotional. It would have been a very difficult role to pull off. I hope she gets an award for her work. I'd hate to think how many words she spoke in the film. She speaks a lot. It's a very Dory film. Hank's a curious critter. Yeah, nice to look at. A little bit sinister, but also, you know, well, in his sinister ways, he also has a helping thing. There is also Bailey, I hope I get the names right here, and Destiny. And without saying too much, in a funny way, these guys got to work together to help each other, but as you find out later in the film, there's reasons why these critters get used, because Bailey's got a little characteristic that helps in the final part of the film. And, well, Destiny's just there because, well, probably because of the chum bucket scene. Oh, silly me, I know why those whales are there, because there's all the jokes about Dory can speak whale. Okay, but I think sadly they don't live up to the same expectation or fun or gravity that the Tank Gang had. The jeopardy in the tank, in that dentist's office, was far grander than what was going on at the marine park, and jeopardy is a very important part of these films. I just need to show you something else to explain what was happening with Marlin. There's the chum bucket, Destiny's chum bucket. Let me just find this part where what Marlin gets up to. Okay, which is important. Actually, it's going to be back here a bit, I think. Well, there are these two sea lions. A bit of a repeat joke from Finding Nemo and the way they call out. You'll see the film, you see what I mean. They play an important role, these guys. And there's another guy with a bucket, like a real silly sea lion. And then there is this crazy bird called Becky. Okay, Becky is my children's favourite character in the film. I actually went to the stores. I thought, where is Becky as a toy? Looked in the shops, probably some cutaway to some footage here, and only in the blind bag toys did I find a Becky. I want a juvenile Dory. I found a Becky, but I'm not going to start blind bags to try and find Becky. Okay, so Becky does exist. Maybe there's other toys coming out soon. Nevertheless, Becky here, and silliness that this is, transport Nemo and Marlin. And this is important because Becky is a silly thing that Marlin loves to work with, because Marlin's a straight guy. This thing here is crazy. As you're going to learn, Hank's quite a complex character. He loves being basically, well, spoon-fed. He doesn't want to go out in the open wild. In a funny way, he's actually disabled, which I didn't realise until the film. And, I mean, one of the scenes, one of the Jeopardy scenes sort of gets given away. It's his fear of the touch pool, and of course in the end, guess where you end up? Yes, well, no surprise, he ends up in the touch pool. And sure, sometimes audience love to be spoon-fed, but sometimes a little bit too much spoon-feeding does spoil a film. There was a little bit too much spoon-feeding going on in Finding Dory, especially with what Dory says in the film. I mean, sure, there's a backstory to Finding Nemo that needs to be filled, and that certainly gets covered. But maybe Dory's elaborate talk in the film could have been clipped back a bit. Bit of a complex story because Nemo and Marlin need to move around, but they always need to move around where there's water, which makes it a little bit, well, convoluted. Great scene here where they jump into a tank where there's a robotic fish, like a robo fish. I think where they might have missed out on a bit of a pun would be to use like an anglerfish. Robo fish. There is the real toys of those. I found one, and there could have been a bit of a flashback scene. One of the great scary scenes of Finding Nemo, but it was a missed opportunity, I feel. Well, the film traverses along. There's whole sections I'm not going to tell you about because you need some surprises, but that stupid crazy bird Becky comes into play again. Totally chaotic and totally nonsensical the way it works, and that's why it works so well with Marlin, okay, because Marlin needs something like that to work with. But what happens is that all these characters here have their little special things come into play, and it all starts to key together in a very spectacular end. And now I've seen the film, I understand how important this truck is. It had me looking at this truck very carefully. Now I understand why Hank is driving and Dory's there. And you get the great, the silliness of Dory, and Hank's trying to do his best to just, resolve the situation, and Dory's doing her best to make sure it doesn't get resolved. But there's, what's quite sad is this truck, which, I mean, as a toy, it could have been done a bit differently and been far more awesome. It's missing a bit of detail that's very important. Where is the door on the top of this truck? That is a very important bit of detail. My son said, "Daddy, where's the thing that they used?" It's not on this truck. It's sort of designed for something else. Obviously, I haven't got it out of the box yet. It's funny. This truck is a very important part of the film, but it's missing a very important part of detail. Even in that comic book, I can't show you the whole picture here. That window, that little doorway, is there. Okay. So it's there, but not on the toy. On the back of the colouring in book, I was hoping, and my children hoping there'd be a cutout of Becky. Well, that didn't happen, did it? I used the colouring in book because, I'm just trying to steer clear of copyright problems. Mind you, other people just extract bits of the film, don't they? I don't know how they get away with that. Yeah, Finding Dory, I really think The reason why it won't be as classic as Finding Nemo, mind you, it's got pulled some amazing figures at the box office. Mind you, it was open in a record number of box offices, is the fact that we lost a lot of that combination going on there in the film. The toys I primarily used in this video to explain Finding Dory were called Swigglefish. That's the character sets there. Swigglefish are a nice little simple toy. There's a little wheel underneath these. They are for dry play. Let's give Nemo a spin. If I'm pushing them along, you see his little tail moving and his little baby fin there and his other fin. Dory's a little bit upright, and she can be a bit tricky in a sense because she's so upright, but her top fin moves and the back fin moves. Okay, she's very Dory, isn't she? Marlin's pretty good because he's got big flapping fins there. His back fin also moves. Hank, who always wants that tag from Dory, moves around more sinister in a way. Yeah, friend or foe, the old Hank, isn't it? Bailey here does that because, well, won't give too much away, but that's what Bailey's head does, and his tail moves also as well. And Destiny does things like that. Nice swishing tail there from Destiny. And also Destiny loves to do things like this. Oh, sorry about that. I didn't quite see you. Oh, that's how you play with the Swigglefish. Yeah, not too bad, not too expensive. Okay, there's my 5 cents on Finding Dory. It's quite a remarkable Disney film. It's right up there, one of their best, but it's not one of the peaky ones. My daughter was a little bit disappointed by the film. Mind you, she's a huge Finding Nemo fan. The story of Finding Dory is probably the little bit of a weak aspect to it. The 13-year gap to get there is probably the part that's making me worry, thinking, wow, the writers would have had trouble getting a story to wrap around Dory to make this worthwhile. How can we do Finding Nemo 2 and keep the same vibe? Well, I can see they've sort of tried to repeat a lot of the jokes. They've sort of taken away the scary moments, some of the peaky scary moments, because remember in Finding Nemo, you had Nemo's mother get killed very early on in the film. Quite a very scary moment. You think, wow, from this point on, this is a different feeling sort of film. Disney do those scare moments quite well. I think they're very important in the story. Finding Dory is a bit of a soft start. Okay? It's very wordy from what Dory has to say. And in a funny way, I think Dory's script may have been better off stripped back a bit. Once again, maybe I need to see the film a couple of times to sort of just listen to very carefully what Dory says. It also relies on flashbacks, and with the flashback aspect, they're very important, but if you've got younger children who don't really key into the flashbacks, they're going to get lost. I noticed my son disengaged with the film by the time we got to the marine park, and I'm spooked by the Sigourney Weaver voice there. And it's actually a little funny part of the film when Sigourney Weaver's voice gets heard and Dory relates to it, okay? As in laugh out loud moments, there aren't many. It's actually quite a dark story, but it's missing those scary moments that we saw in Finding Nemo. It's a sad story, okay? But it's one of those things, of course, there's a turnaround. We won't go where the turnaround happens or why it happens, but it's different. In that sense, it is different to Finding Nemo. But like I pointed out with the toys, we lose the chemistry, the great, straight guy and funny girl, a comedy duo. It's like Abbott and Costello. And that's really what was driving in Finding Nemo. And once that chemistry gets changed in Finding Dory, I think it does tend to struggle. I did look at what a lot of the film critics, the real high-end film critics, had to say. I think it was curious to see how positive they were about the film. And I thought to myself, wow, did they see the same film that I saw? I really think the wording in it could have been stripped back, and like I think back to the little feature that was on before Finding Dory, we saw a thing called Piper. Was it Piper, like little sandpiper bird? I don't want to say too much about it. It's best left as a surprise. But in that, it is amazing there's no words, and it's your classic, the story is told by actions. Okay, sometimes stripping back or stripping away all the words and letting it play out as actions and interactions is quite amazing. Quite an emotional short piece, and in a funny way, I remember that much more clearly than Finding Dory. I wonder if they sort of tacked it onto the front because they thought Finding Dory, or Disney thought Finding Dory is a little bit of a weaker story. They needed to sort of just have a tack on at the beginning there to get you sort of lifted. I hope you've sort of gleaned something from what I've had to say here. Films can be a very complex thing to make. They go through all sorts of morphing and changes, and scripts can usually get smaller and smaller as things go on. And I think Finding Dory needed a real cropping of what was being said in it. There's a lot of there's not many surprises because a lot of the things that are about to happen sort of get said just before they happen. Okay, so I don't know. I know audiences can be quite dumb sometimes, but sometimes being banged over the head before every sort of joke doesn't really quite work out. Maybe children love that. Then again, it is a children's film. But Finding Nemo is also a children's film, but it sort of does work at other levels. And you think about classic animated films like Up. That is an incredible film that works on just about every level you can imagine. Very rarely do we get great films like that. Anyway, I'm going to do something different here. I'm going to let Dory sign off. Speaking while...